I want to talk to you about parenting autistic kids. This is a picture of long ago with me and my brood. 3 of my children are autistic, and every autistic child is different, but there are some tips that I think we can share that are in common. Having said that all kids are different, I think it's important to also understand that autistic kids are actually very different to non-autistic kids. And that usual reciprocity between parents and our children happens differently too. And if we're not prepared for this, we can feel rejected, we can feel hurt. And when our young people don't respond to us, there are a number of reasons. Some of those might be sensory, they're already overwhelmed. It might be to do with not quite knowing or understanding what's being required. There are so many things, but it's not true to say that that children are not reciprocating. It's just that it's happening differently, and that's what we need to talk about. So one of the reasons that reciprocity, for example, happens differently for autistic kids is that as autistic people, our brains are actually wired differently to non-autistic people, and that doesn't mean there are any wires in our brain. That's just a metaphor. That means our brains are programmed to respond differently. We, as autistic people, respond to one thing at a time, for example. So we might line toys up rather than play with them traditionally. We might want to do the same things over and over and over and over. We might even be more interested in technology than we are in you. And, the thing about technology is that it doesn't come with body language and fragrance and jewelry and all sorts of things that can interrupt our ability to notice, capture our attention. Technology is as it is. It's straightforward and very much easier to relate to than people. So it's not that we might not want to know you or not like you. It's not that at all. It's how you present. So when you join us, come alongside and sharing in the technology with us, and of course you need to do that by talking and asking our permission. Please do not just plonk yourself down and join us. I don't mean it that way. But showing interest in our video games and in the things that we're doing, we can learn so much together. Video games are a brilliant way to build up understanding that's mutual and beneficial to us both. This is one of my granddaughters lining up her blocks around the coffee table. Both my granddaughter here and my son are on the spectrum, so it's just a picture of lining up. Another picture of another granddaughter. This is Holly, doing beautiful lining up. The children at this play day were building all sorts of things with their wooden blocks. Towers that went up, walls that went around. Holly was just so excited just to lay them in order along the ground, one after another in a long line. It was very exciting. So as well as lining up our toys and showing bigger interest in technology than in people sometimes, being single-minded also means we're very literal. So we need clear instruction. Metaphor can actually be puzzling. An example here is sit down and sit up. I wonder which one she wants me to do. Metaphor is commonly used in language every day, but if we're not careful when we're trying to explain something, we can actually cause confusion. I remember saying to my son when he was very young about dinner was on the table, and I asked him to come to the table, and he got cross. He actually thumped me and said, "Dinner shouldn't be on the table, it should be on a plate." So there's lots of times we don't even realize the metaphors that we're using can be confusing. Because our brains are designed to be one-tracked and do one thing at a time, which can mean we're very literal, this also impacts on our senses. Autistic children have a hard time regulating their sensory input and output. And that means we have a hard time regulating ourselves too. So as autistic people, we will need support. It's helpful to observe our children and learn what sensory systems are inclined towards being overwhelmed or underwhelmed, and sometimes it moves between both. And I'll explain this a bit more. Most of us know about our external sensory system. These include our senses that connect us to the external world, enabling us to hear, see, taste, touch, smell, move, and so on. This is a very important sensory system, of course. This is where all information comes through our senses to our brain, and our brain tries to make sense of it. And if you're living with an autistic brain, our senses can very quickly be overwhelmed. Sight can be light's too bright. I'm wearing my cap here to help shield light from me. I've also got tinted lenses, which are called Erlen lenses, which also help change the way my brain makes sense of vision, things that come through my sense of seeing. It's the same with hearing and smelling. It's so important to notice when a child's got their hands over their ears or fingers in their ears. Is it because their sense of hearing is making or causing them to notice things that are too loud, when they might not be loud for everybody else, but for them they are? They'll even do this sometimes when they're being given an instruction, a demand of some kind. Immediately the hands go over the ears, not necessarily because your voice is too loud, but the instructions itself is too overwhelming. So it just cuts this down by putting the hands to their ears. And we need to notice this so that we can adjust how we relate to our kids, and also it might mean enabling them the sorts of supports that help with things like ear defenders, headphones, a cap, sunglasses, and so on. One of the sensory systems you might not be so familiar with is our internal sensory system, also called interoception sense, or the sense of interoception. Our internal senses equally as important as the external senses, but they're connecting us to an awareness of our inner selves. So we get to notice our heart rate, whether we're hot or cold, our temperature, our breathing. We notice the state of our bladder, if we're hungry, if our bones ache. Interoception is really, really important, not just for those awareness of those senses, but without that kind of awareness, we can't actually notice our emotions. We can't regulate our emotional self either. How can I tell if I'm anxious if I'm not actually noticing that I'm breathing a bit harder, my heart rate's beating a bit faster, my mouth might feel a bit dry? How can I take charge of that emotion and I'm not even noticing it? So this is another very important area that's not given enough care, and there are brilliant ways to help our kids get in touch and to notice that their interoception senses too. So if we put those sensory systems together, we experience the world externally through vision, smell, hearing, touch, taste, vestibular, sense of balance, proprioception, that's body awareness, and interoception, that state of internal organs from the things I mentioned before that give us a sense of whether we're in pain, our temperature, whether we're well or not, hungry, thirsty, needing the toilet, and so on. These two systems need to work together, but because our brains as autistic people are so single-minded, we can be really well overtaken in one area. That means we're not connected or noticing another. So it can take a bit of work with parents and teachers and whoever is supporting us when we're children to help us integrate these senses and build connections to them. So again, with our brains and our ability to be so single-focused, some sensory information will be overwhelming, senses can be heightened, or underwhelming, dulled down, and those kids will, they're likely to be kids who want to play with dirt in the garden, maybe even their own poo, mess around with their food. They're seeking, sensory seekers. And then our interoceptive senses, those can be offline, so we might not notice those either. For example, we may not notice how warm or how cold we are, may not notice the state of our bladder, if we're thirsty, in pain, bored, and so on. And I know I'm kind of going over these things a bit, but I really need us to understand this, the behavior that we offer, we live as autistic people. It's not born from the same disposition as non-autistic children. We're not being difficult or naughty. It can come across that way, but we really don't know what's happening or what's going on. So we can't respond from our sense of knowing. We can't even choose, because at that point in time, if these things are in control, then we are not. And if everything is too much and it's overwhelming, things too loud, too bright, too strongly tasting, too squishy, too hard, too soft, they really are too much. And as I said, our internal sense, that's interoception, gives us clues to our emotional state. I'm not great at noticing the state of my emotions. I might be sad or uncomfortable or unwell or anxious or happy. And if I don't notice or don't have the words for it, I might even give the wrong expression on my face to the actual way I'm feeling. So I might laugh when I'm sad. I might cry when I'm happy. These things can cross over. And for me as an autistic person, I also live with synesthesia, which is a word that means I've got a kind of crossover from areas of my brain to a different area. So for me, emotions are experienced as colour. Now, we often use colour coding as a way of relating to autistic kids. We use thermometers with a sort of red colour getting higher to demonstrate temperature. We use colours like red in particular for stop. This can be problematic for synesthesics because red for me is actually exciting and it's not going to make me stop using colour. If you have autistic kids and you're using colour and they're not responding in the way that you were expecting, it could be that the colour you're using doesn't equate to the things they're feeling. So double check on this. If this is true for me, it will be true for others too, I'm sure. So double check. So earlier I mentioned interoception programs. These are usually programs of exercise that help build connection to feeling. Now, kids run and move all the time and perhaps ride their bikes, and there's lots of exercise going on, jumping on the trampoline, whatever it is. But this is a particular way of using perhaps a stretch to build an awareness of feeling. So, for example, if I say stretch out your fingers, and hold that for maybe 30 seconds, which we won't do during this talk. And then I'll say to you, relax. Where did you feel that stretch? Was it between your fingers? Was it in your wrist? In your arm? And we have a think about it. Then we repeat that same exercise again, stretching out your fingers. Hold it for 30 seconds. But this time, focus on your thumb. Where are you feeling that in your thumb as you stretch your fingers? And then, of course, you relax and you talk about that. And young people begin to build up a cellular memory of where they're feeling this stretch in their fingers. So when you do these exercises, you always do them twice, and you always point to a particular area, and you encourage a young person to focus in on that feeling, and then you ask them where they felt it. And people say different things. People will feel it different things in different places. And the point of this is that you are building a connection to via an external activity of an internal feeling. This is important because this is the sort of thing that helps young people notice their breathing, their heart rate, and we can then talk realistically about what it's like to be anxious, and we can talk about what ways are best to cope with that anxiety. But until they're noticing it, talking about how to cope with that isn't really relevant. So interoception programs like this, and there are quite a few I think on the internet, are very helpful to help build that connection to our internal sense. Otherwise, we're not going to notice. I still find it hard to tell the difference between being thirsty and being hungry. And I'll often eat something and then which doesn't fit because I was actually thirsty. And so this isn't a one-off thing that you go through a program for a week and you've got it fixed. It takes a bit of work to sort out because autism stays with us. Autistic kids become autistic adults, and this is a lifelong journey. It's not uncommon that autistic kids have issues with eating, and if we're not careful, food can actually become a battlefield, and this won't be a war that's easily won. So we do have to take it bit by bit and aim not to give this too much attention, but obviously take it seriously. It's fascinating that food, along with interoception awareness, has a sensory component too. So not only might you not know you're hungry, you might not cope with the textures, the colours, the other noises that are going on that distract you from being able to eat, etc. So it's very important that if you have a child or are aware of kids, autistic kids that have eating issues, then yes, we take it seriously, but we need to do a number of things that might be helpful. So some of those things that might help are things like not mixing the colours of food. For a while, Holly, my middle granddaughter, would only eat white food. So even though she wanted her bread toasted, it had to be just kind of warmed and not made brown. Chicken, if it had a brown colour on from being grilled, that had to be cut away. It was just overwhelming for her, and she would eat things, but only if they were a particular way. It might mean you have to give me things one at a time, not foods altogether. So on a plate it might be just the vegetables, possibly not even cooked, just the meat, or it might be a couple of things, but they mustn't touch each other. I might be a kid who needs to graze, so we have various foods like nuts and raisins and fruit around on plates in the room, and they just get eaten as the kid goes by. Don't make a fuss about food. If you do, it really does take on a different quality that then becomes a battle. Don't time me with eating. You've got to eat that in 10 minutes because some kids will stuff loads of food in their mouths. They won't swallow it though. Others will make themselves sick, etc. But please ask me what I like and listen to that. It's important. As adults, we are allowed to choose what we eat, but we often don't give that same right to kids. And autistic kids, for a number of reasons, need support with this. Another one of those senses that can be overwhelming is our sense of smell. So ordinary things can have a smell that is just too uncomfortable to bear. That can be things from shampoos, deodorants that others are using, shaving cream in the bathroom, the way an adult might smell. Oh dear, there are so many things. Obvious foods which can have an overwhelming smell, but sometimes things you wouldn't even pick up on. That smell might be too strong. If the food is overwhelming and is too strong, I might need to eat away or separately from others, and that just means a small table and chair placed a little bit further away rather than all around the table. It might mean you dish up in one room and feed me in another. I might need to eat off my chosen plate. At home here in Australia, I have red enamel plates that I eat from. I don't eat from anything else. I like them. As an adult, I can choose. But we need to take notice of this, because if things are overwhelming and closing me down because they're too strong in the way they smell, then I'm not going to want to eat or be with other people, etc., if that's the case. Touch, another sense that can be overwhelming. We can experience touch as overwhelming. Even slight touch can feel painful. So some autistic kids are very happy to have a firm hug or weighted garments, weighted toys, weighted blankets. But the ordinary touch from everyday life, a parent wanting to give us a hug, for example, might actually be overwhelming, especially if we're already overwhelmed, and a parent might think they're trying to calm us down or give us a supporting hug, but actually it's just adding to our sensory input and we're already overwhelmed. So please don't take this personal. It's not a personal thing. It's about me as an autistic person and my sensory system. It's not about you. So you need to relate to me differently. Please don't touch me suddenly without asking. Let me know. Don't approach me from behind and I'm not seeing you. I can hit out and then I'm in trouble because I've hurt someone, but it can be just a bit of reflex to do that. That's not chosen. No surprises, please. As a kid, I was often accused of behavior that was challenging for other people. I was called naughty, difficult. On my school report it said things like Wen's incapable of doing as they are told, but actually it was how I was being told that was difficult for me to understand. And then people had this expectation that I'd kind of understand and would do something, whatever it was, and I couldn't because I didn't really get what it was they were asking of me. And if you're not connected to your inner sense through, that interoception that we talked about earlier, if your external senses are overwhelming you with information, and you're part of a school classroom or a family group, and there's so much going on, it it can feel not just painful and difficult, but a kid, because they're children, can take it personally and feel like this is being done to them. And the only way they can get you to stop is to hit out, is to scream, is to hum loudly, is to run away, and so on. So challenging behavior, I often want to say to people, if you knew how challenging you were, you'd understand my behavior. We need to take a step back and think, why is this behavior happening? I believe that all behavior is functional. And if I don't know any other way, I can't choose to act. I can only react. So helping me with my sensory issues might help. Do I need ear defenders, sunglasses, or a cap? Is this a sensory issue? Is demand causing too much anxiety? One of my granddaughters is demand avoidant. and we have to talk to her. We talk to her in ways that make it easier for her. We don't put across an instruction as a demand. I might say to Holly, do you want to wear your sneakers or your ballet shoes? I would resist saying, put your shoes on, which is seen as a demand. We encourage her to share in ways with us that are if she's thought about the idea. So we don't dictate or speak in ways that are taken as a demand. We change that around, because that demand or sense of demand from her perspective is born out of anxiety, and we want to reduce anxiety. Do I actually understand you? And can I do what you're asking of me at this time? It might be I can, that instruction needs to be broken down more into ways that are more accessible for me. It might be that I can never do this because I'm not capable of it. We need to step back, understand all behavior is functional, and then work out what the function of that behavior is and address it differently in a way that the autistic young person can respond. So I will read you a poem about behavior. This goes over the next few slides. When is behavior not behavior? I jumped inside my skin, even though I knew it was coming. I knew it would be you. It's like I hyper-focus, so I am prepared, but this just increases the pain, and I become more scared. I understand what crunchy is. I knew it meant the bits, but when it was inside my mouth, I was surprised it felt like this. This was uncomfortable, uneven, and sudden, you see. Despite the fact I planned for it, it came as a shock to me. The voices seem all around me, but no one else is there. How can I know who is speaking? The sounds are coming from where? They seem to be within me, these voices so loud and so clear. What are they saying, and why do they haunt my ear? Oh, that's you just thinking. Your thoughts are within, but without. They are unspoken echoes that in your mind do shout. They want to be heard also, like a board that sounds. No, they don't help at all. They just go round and round. Why is it when I cry, I'm laughing inside of me? And when I laugh, the pain of it is plain for all to see. So another reason for some of the behavior that we see in autism, especially in younger people, is underdeveloped object permanence. You know that object permanence is, you can see it in kids developing when you play games of peekaboo, and you put your hands in front of you and then you say hi and you hide again, hi, and it's like each time you do that, the baby laughs. You can hide something under a cloth, and it's to them it's like it's gone, and when you pull the cloth back and it's there again, they're excited. And over time they begin to realize that it hasn't gone away, it's just hidden. So objects have a life of their own, even when you can't see them. And this is object permanence, and it's usually established as an understanding cognitively by the time a child's way before a year of age. Now, in autism, object permanence is very often underdeveloped. So I'm not being difficult or lazy when I go over the same thing or constantly check in. I've lost the sense that something is still here. So pictures can help, or a video story. We can use as a tool to revisit a concept and be reminded that all is well. So, for example, when I went away as a student to the UK on went away for 6 months on an exchange program. I knew Australia existed and you could see it in a book of maps, etc., but I lost all sense that it was still here, and I was really worried that my family were not around. And somebody at an autism group in Bradford, when I spoke to them about it, said, it's helpful to have a photo in your wallet that you can look at and remind yourself. And it was so helpful. That picture helps me to understand my family was still here, even though I couldn't feel them because I was in a different part of the world. So object permanence will contribute, or a lack of object permanence will contribute to some of those fears we have. Our granddaughter used to wake up in the night not knowing if mummy was still there. And eventually we used walkie-talkies, and she could listen on one end, mummy could pick up the other end in her bedroom just down the hall. They could talk to each other. Now, this wasn't very comfortable at 2 o'clock in the morning, but as we practiced it on the walkie-talkie in the bedroom, on the walkie-talkie in the garden, on the walkie-talkie in the bathroom, Holly built up a sense, an understanding that mummy was still here in a different part of the house, just she couldn't see her. And this understanding is useful for a whole heap of things that we will need to practice, because this has huge impact on the behavior of our young people. Whatever we're doing with our autistic young people, it should be nothing about me without me. So please check in with me and involve me in all those decisions that concern me. You'll have to do this in an accessible way, I understand. And there are some things you don't negotiate with young people, that just has to happen. But even so, that can be put across in a way that makes sense. Please avoid surprises. They scare me. Things even like birthday parties can be overwhelming. I remember as a 10-year-old, I was in hospital at the time, Bath and Wessex Orthopaedic Hospital in Bath in Somerset it was then, now it's Avon I think, but I hid under the blanket of the bed when they came in with a cupcake with a candle in, singing happy birthday. I had no idea how to respond or what to do. I just hoped that they would go away. Surprises scare me. Please don't take away my passions, but help me explore life through them. People sometimes think that we're taken up with something of an interest, and they'll call it an obsession, and they want us to let go of that, and they'll even offer it as a reward if we do something else in the meantime. But with our brains being one-tracked, single-minded, we're actually switched off unless we're interested. So it's really important to build interest and to work with what it is you're hoping we will learn via our interest. So you need to use photos, pictures, illustrations, cartoons, story. YouTube's great. Video, words, and any other means to help me hold on to and build up the concepts that we need for everyday communication. Things like yours, ours, mine, no, yes, have, gone but still here, later, different, same, come, go, and all of these other things which people take for granted in a conversation we may not understand. So finding ways to illustrate those and build that understanding as we parent our autistic kids and as we support them is vital to good communication and to having us both on the same page and to building reciprocity so that we can relate in a way that's beneficial. Parenting styles change and are different. As parents, we're all different, we're all unique, and we all have our ways of relating. But whatever our parenting style, please engage with me via my passions. Don't do it to me, don't do it for me, do it with me. I'm really curious, but not easily switched on. I want to learn, but I need time. I might love active play. I remember playing on the trampoline and absolutely loving it, but not knowing how to stop. I didn't connect to being tired at that time or knowing when my legs were sore from too much. So I went overboard on those things and then have what they call a meltdown, which is a really strange expression because I didn't melt or go down, but it's a term that just means I had enough and I had a bit of a reaction to that. So I might love active play but not know how or when to stop. So I might need, for example, to use a timer on my iPad. I might need preparations and familiarity before I can venture into new things. Pictures of the new car, the new house, the new classroom, the new people I might meet, building up a story about whatever is going to happen so that I can build a structure about that to know what to expect. No one autistic child is alike, so we have to be prepared to adapt to my needs, to that particular child's needs. And it might seem like this is all too hard and too much, but we need you. We're depending on you. You've got this. On my webpage, www.wenlawson.com, there's lots and lots of material to read and to watch and listen to that I believe are probably very helpful when it comes to parenting autistic kids. And wanting to know more about interoception, please check out this website also. And thank you for listening.